I'm getting an angiogram done today. Hey, what's shaking bacon? I hope you're doing well. So I'm going for an angiogram today based on what happened from my doctor's appointment from my last video, which if you want to check out, you'll see. And basically what happened was the doctor called me and said, your stress test was horrible. We need to send you for an angiogram. And I was like, okay, well, why? So long story short, after a bit of a mix-up, because I fell through the cracks and about 8 months went by before I got the results from my stress test from last summer. He said it was really serious. I needed to go. I had significant scarring in my heart and some other issues. And I said, I thought that went fine. That's why you guys didn't get a hold of me. And he then compared it to the stress test I had 2 years before. The stress test I had 2 years before, my cardiologist before, I had a cardiologist before that. She said everything was fine from it. So when this doctor checked out my last test I had last June in 2023 with the test I had 2 years before that, he said, actually, the results are the same as that one. So there's been no advancement of any coronary artery disease. So we're good. And I said, well, wait a minute. You just told me the stress test went bad and I needed an angiogram. So is this equally as bad as last time? How come you guys have two different opinions? I want an angiogram. So they're sending me for an angiogram today and I'm going to see how that goes. So I had one once before when I had my heart attack. They went up my radial artery in my wrist. They used to do it through the femur, the femoral artery actually, and they go up your leg and it would go all the way up to your heart. And what happens is they insert a dye, and an angiogram is an x-ray, and they go all the way up to your heart and insert a dye into your coronary arteries. Your coronary arteries supply your whole heart with blood. So there's your heart, and then there's some branches that come out of the heart. And what happens is one branch goes and it feeds the rest of the body. And there's another couple branches that come out immediately right beside those. And their job is to feed the heart. And it's the left and right coronary artery. So you get an artery on the left side and the right side. And they disperse into smaller and smaller arteries as they go along. So this is going to be a test that they're going to put this dye into those arteries. And then from there, they'll do an x-ray. And it's like a high contrast x-ray basically. And this is the most accurate way we have to tell how anyone's arteries are doing. The problem with this test is it's one of the most risky tests to find this out. A safer way to do it is a calcium scoring test. Now, I did that a few years ago. I was a little too big for the machine. They just couldn't get a good x-ray. They said it's probably because of your size. They got a number, but it didn't seem like it was a good number. And I'd only been doing Carnivore for a little while by that point, strict that is. So I've been doing Carnivore on and off since 2018. And I had my first heart attack in the fall of 2015. So we went from 2015 with my heart attack to 2018 where I started doing Carnivore intermittently. I would do it for a few months here, then I'd go off it really bad for a few months. And I just had a long time before I became strict with Carnivore. And then I became strict with Carnivore in 2021, haven't looked back. It's been great, it's been easy. Once you get strict with Carnivore, there's no temptations. So keep that in mind when it comes to Carnivore. So this is interesting because the doctor said my results haven't advanced in the last 2 years of this stress test. So that shows me that any damage that was possibly done was before I became Carnivore, when my diet was all over the place and I used to have a lot of junk food. So I'm still dealing with insulin resistance. Though I've lost 160 pounds, I'm still dealing with insulin resistance. And it's really weird to be eating a very clean diet and have some other issues. I'm going to be seeing a doctor in the near future, specifically for weight loss, and I'm not going to take any medications or anything like that because I'm trying to get it diagnosed. I want to see an endocrinologist and I want to see an internist because I want to know what's going on with my liver and my pancreas. Clearly, there's some issue there. So I got to figure that out. And that's been going on for a while now, almost 2 years. I've been dealing with high fasting insulin. But anyway, back to the angiogram. So this angiogram, they go up your radial artery. The last time I had this done, I don't know if it was from the angiogram or if it was from the procedure putting the stents in. It was most likely that, but I dealt with pericarditis afterwards. And pericarditis is the sac. The pericardium is the sac that's around the heart, and it filled with fluid, and it started putting pressure on my breathing. And it got to the point where normally what they do is just have you sit up in a reclined position, kind of like you're lying in a reclining chair. And that takes the pressure off the heart. and it tends to manage it with a little bit of anti-inflammatories. Now, when I had that the first time around in 2015 with my heart attack, my anti-inflammatories didn't do anything. They tried 2 or 3 different types of anti-inflammatories before they finally had to give me morphine. And interestingly enough, with me, when I take morphine, I don't feel any different. I don't feel any kind of buzz. Some people have talked about how they feel bad when they come off of it. I've never had that issue with morphine, but it was the only thing that was handling this pericarditis. And I had that for a few days. I would have been out of the hospital the day after my heart attack, but I had that pericarditis. And that, my dog's being a bit of a sap. Canine, do you want to come up? Do you want to come up? So I was dealing with that pericarditis, and it took a few days to get that managed. So I was in the hospital originally for about 5 days for my first heart attack. Well, my only heart attack. But this time around, I know what to expect that way. So I'm going to make sure after they do this procedure that I'm propped up, because I don't want to risk going through that headache again. And it's overall, it's not like it's a horribly risky procedure, but there are some risks and side effects that you might have to deal with something like an angiogram. Now, I notice a lot of my audience are people in their 40s and 50s. So there's some people in their 20s and 30s. So this is something you need to start paying attention to in your 20s and 30s to manage atherosclerosis, to manage heart disease, because this starts in your 20s and 30s, and it's starting sooner and sooner in life. I had my first heart attack just over 40 years old. So who knows what time you're going to have this in your life, and you got to start taking this seriously when you're younger, not when you're in your 40s or 50s. Now, I tried to manage my carbohydrate addiction in my 40s, and I really didn't manage it till my mid-late 40s, where I became 100% strict. I don't have anything off a carnivore diet, not a lick, taste, or bite. And it manages to keep my inflammation managed pretty well overall. I feel really good doing it. I keep black pepper out of my diet. I find that helps a lot more, because if I have black pepper in my diet, I don't even feel like I'm doing carnivore. My joints are stiff and achy, and I just move like an older man. So anyway, back to the angiogram. The way this works is they go up the radial artery, up your wrist, and it's interesting. When I had that done, I could feel the pressure going all the way up my arm, inch by inch. And I kind of have a more analytical mind. So I was lying there and I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting, right? And I was feeling it go all the way up, and I was feeling it go across my chest. And it wasn't painful. It was just a sensation, like pressure. And there are some risks involved, as I was saying. And one of the risks is they could damage the blood vessel. So the blood vessel is like, imagine it like your skin. It's rather elastic, right? And when they're putting something up your artery, they're kind of bouncing off the walls a little bit, especially when there's bends in the pipe, so to speak. So they could cause a little bit of damage. And keep in mind, if there's any plaquing, they could kind of chip some of that loose. So that's something else that is a bit of a risk factor. Another risk factor is excessive bleeding. My father had one done almost 20 years ago in his femoral artery, and he almost bled out. I was there, actually. I went into the room because I was like, what's taking him so long? He was 2 hours over the limit they said he was going to be before he could come back out. I was like, this is weird. So I opened the door to where everyone was resting, and there was a big pool of blood on the floor, like a crime scene. And it turned out, I was like, oh, they're busy. And I shut the door, and I was like, I'm not going to bother them right now. And it turned out that was my dad's blood. They kind of sat him up and said, okay, let's try walking. And he walked for a little bit, and it just started bleeding. They took him right into the bathroom. So everything was fine, though. He was good. And he went for open heart surgery like a week or two later, or a few weeks later. I don't think that's as much of an issue nowadays. I believe they go up the radial artery more commonly nowadays. That's the way they did it with me when I was having my heart attack years ago. So another risk is stroke or heart attack. So, it's important to keep aspirin on hand afterwards. I think it's important for the next day or two to make sure that you have people around you all the time, because something like that can happen and you may not be aware of it. And it's good to have people that are just checking in on you after a procedure like that. Another thing that could happen is kidney damage due to the dye that they use, as well as just a reaction to the dye in general. You'll know it if it happens. I don't know what the symptoms are, but I'm sure I'll know it when it happens if something's abnormal. I'm usually pretty in touch with my body and how I regulate things. And last but not least, I could have irregular heart rhythms. And that's just from them kind of fooling around there in the heart. So sometimes the heart handles it well and sometimes it doesn't. So either way, this is going to be a pretty straightforward procedure. If you don't hear from me on Monday, something went wrong. I put out videos on Mondays and Fridays. So this is how an angiogram works. It's a pretty straightforward procedure, really. Some of you have had to deal with this. I bet you all of you out there watching this have known someone who's had to deal with something like this, getting an angiogram. So let me know how all that went for you out there. This is a pretty straightforward procedure, but it's the riskiest of all the procedures to get done when it comes to diagnosing the blood vessels in the heart. Anyway, thanks a lot. Take two. Talk to you later.